Hey, AJ.
How you doing, mate?
I don't know. When you started talking about, before you were talking about God, and God is always loving, I feel like I'm in disagreement with you on that.
Well, if that's the case, you're in disagreement with God as well, can I point out?
Yeah.
Yeah. But go ahead with your disagreement.
Yeah, I'm in a disagreement with you and God.
Yep.
But I also have a feeling that you're right.
Yep. And this is the conundrum, isn't it, that we've often faced, is we have this inside feeling as, oh, this might be true, this might be true. Oh, I don't want this to be true, or whatever it is going on. So what's going on for you in this regard, do you feel?
I don't know, when you started talking about that, it just brought back the memory of when I first started tackling this issue.
Yep.
I wrote this big long letter to God and it had like 100 four-letter words in it.
Yep.
And I was just saying to God...
You mean love, 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 love? Not those words. Right, I got you.
No. But I basically just had a big... told God what I felt about God and the world.
Yeah.
And I still feel that way. Not in the same way, but I feel like I can't understand. The one thing that I just can't get is potentiality.
Right.
I can't understand why an all-knowing being creates potentiality for some of the things that have existed and is existing now in me and the world, and I just can't get that emotionally. I can't get that. Why I feel God is not always loving.
Well, if you think about it though, Josh, like for God to not create the potentiality, God would have had to not give you the gift of free will. So in other words, God would have had to create you as a robot rather than a completely free individual. Now, when you think about it, what's the greatest gift you can give to your children?
I guess free will and freedom.
Yeah, freedom, isn't it? Like freedom for them to be themselves and express themselves however they wish, even if it's in direct disharmony with what you would wish for them. Isn't that the greatest gift?
I just keep wanting to say, but God knew that this was going to happen.
Yes.
So God is a bastard.
Right. Do you want to add any other expletives?
No, that's
Okay,
enough for me.
No worries. So God knew that this would happen. Why? In what way? Like what way? Because God's all-knowing, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So because God's all-knowing, you feel God knew this would happen with free will.
Yeah.
Right? And yet even with the potential of this happening, God still created you. And that made God a bastard. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yep, no worries. Okay. Well, that's an interesting perspective. But not truthful. Because who creates the results of the exercise of our free will?
That's us.
Yeah. Who is directly responsible for the exercise of the will?
Me and what drives me.
Yeah. Now, can I then blame anyone aside from myself for the exercise of my will? If I have free will, which means I can go in any positive direction or any negative direction or any neutral direction, or I can sit still on this chair for the rest of my life and starve to death, I can do either thing. I can do any of those things. I can choose any of those things. Who can I blame for that choice? You see, what we often want to do, Josh, is we want to blame God for the gift of free will rather than looking at how we're using the gift of free will and seeing that that is the thing that's to blame for the pain that we're experiencing. Do you see?
Yeah.
We want to hold on to the fact that God's the bastard because we want to blame God for this gift that we've been given and its poor exercise that we chose to exercise that resulted in our personal pain. What we're actually doing, when you think about it, is we're saying, I'm in pain and I want to find somebody else responsible. I want to find somebody else is responsible for this pain that I'm in. And ultimately, who's responsible? the person who gave me the gift of free will that allowed me to make the choice that created my pain, or that allowed the human race to create the choice that created the pain. And he's the person responsible. But that's a direct avoidance of the truth. The truth is that actually the person who has got the gift is responsible for its use. And that's a basic truth. If I give you a car, can you ever blame me in a court of law for you running over someone purposefully with that car?
No.
You can't, can you? There's no law in the country or on the planet that would probably let you get away with blaming me, is there? And yet we do this with God all the time. Why do we expect to be treated one way with man and another way with God? Why do we respect that? Because we want somebody to blame so that we can get away from the personal responsibility of choice. And collectively, mankind wants to get away from the personal responsibility of choice as well, not just us as individuals. We collectively want to avoid the personal responsibility of choice. Does that make sense? We want to actually do it because we want someone to blame, because we don't want to come face to face with the consequences of our own free will decisions. And one thing you have to do on this path towards God is come face to face with the way in which you use your own will. Right? So the truth is, it's very good that you raged at God for a while. But is that the real emotion in the end that needs to be released? The real emotion is actually a desire to not take responsibility and a pain that other people on this planet have not taken responsibility, and in the process of them not taking responsibility for their choices, you have received pain in your life. And we don't want to feel that pain. The pain that actually my mum made choices, my dad made choices, my brother made choices, my sister made choices, my environment, my family, my country made choices, the nations on earth made choices, and all of those choices, as I said yesterday, control my fate, control the amount of pain that I personally am in. And I don't want to feel that these are the creators. And while I don't want to feel that those are the actual creators of my pain, I am never going to be part of changing them. As soon as I start to feel that actually I'm a part of the creator of your pain, then I will start taking responsibility for my part in its creation. And I will then start taking responsibility for the way in which I've used my own free will, which is all I can do. And it's the most powerful thing you can do to help another person, is to take control of how you use your own will. And my feelings are that while you can express all of those emotions to God, which you can, by the way, express for thousands of years to come, it's not going to help you address the underlying emotion that other people have created your pain because of their denial of their choice to use their will that they were given as a gift unlovingly. And I often liken it in myself as like me getting the gift of a vehicle. Somebody gives me a car, and the very first thing I try to do with it is see how fast it goes. In other words, the very first thing I try to do with many gifts is to test its limit. Do you notice that? That's a natural thing in the human race, is it not? We want to test the limit of every gift. So what we do is we get this gift of free will and we want to test its limits. And so what we do is we test the limits of its negativity, right down to depravity. And then we test the limits of it in a positive direction, although that hasn't been stretched very much on the planet at this point. But this is the process we are currently in. Are we going to test the limits of it in a positive direction or not? You see? We've tested the limits of its depravity. Let's test the limits in the other direction and see where that takes us, what direction it takes us in. And this is the thing we need to consider, is that God gave us the ability to test the limits of the gift. Just like if I gave you a car, you could decide to floor it and see how fast it goes down Butterham Main Street. When you get to the roundabout at the other end, you'll soon see the results of that test. Does that make sense? And you'll come to this cataclysmic event, which we call an accident, right? And you'll feel the results of pain in your body, the car being destroyed and all these other things. And that is the result of the test of it in this negative direction, the test of the gift that you've been given. And all God has done is given you this gift and then allowed you to test it to its limits if you wish. Now, my wish has been to not test it to the limits of depravity. Even in this life, I haven't wished that. But many have, for all sorts of emotional reasons. And not all can be blamed on their parents. Because there's many people here who have been abused sexually and have never abused another child in their entire life. Right? So how can you blame abuse on the fact that you've been abused? Right? The truth is that we still have free will choice at every time in our life. And we can test the limits of this free will as much as we like and then blame someone else for the consequence, but it's not going to help us in the end. So my suggestion is to feel who is actually to blame for the depraved use of their own will that's caused you pain in your life, and feel about that emotionally rather than trying to project that blame onto God, which actually is not going to deal with those emotions anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot of what you said, I get up here.
Yeah, just
But,
can't feel it yet.
Like I'm still not agreeing here.
So let's go for it emotionally. If you were going for this emotionally, what I would do is I'd get out the punching bag out the back and I'd yell and scream and swear at God until I connect with the true sadness and grief that's inside of me about God.
I've done a fair bit of raging at God.
Yep.
But obviously not enough.
Well, if we've done the raging but we're not connecting to the grief, then there's a blockage in the middle. So pray to God about, what is this block? Show me the block. What's going on? Does it make sense?
Yeah.
There's a block to going one way. And my suggestion is, we often blame God because it's easier to blame God than to blame the people who actually did create the problems. Because God doesn't yell back at us and doesn't try to hammer us and we can blame God and get away with it, in other words. And this is what we often do in our relationships, is we choose people who are the softest people in our life and we dump all of our stuff on them, because if we choose the hard-nosed nails person, they'll just bop us in the nose. Do you see? And often what we're doing with God is we're projecting at God all of this stuff that man has actually chosen to do, and in the process of doing that, we're actually avoiding the confrontation of the man who chose to do it, of the way he used his free will. And oftentimes in our emotional processing, we want to avoid it because we're scared of what that interaction is going to bring up in ourselves. And my suggestion is that's what's happening here for you.
So even going and confronting those people that have caused me pain physically
would be a more appropriate action than blaming somebody who gets you away from who really is to blame anyway. Does that make sense? Or who really created it, or was responsible anyway. Yeah.